Welcome to the training today, and here is the contents of what we're going to be going through today. We're going to briefly go through a description of the DigiUp project and kind of shortly tell you what we do. And we're going to go through the learning objectives. So basically, we want to communicate with you like what we wish that you will learn today. Then we're going to go through like 3 basic principles of designing and planning a website. And throughout, we're going to go through some basic terminology, things to consider. We tried our best to craft this in a way that it's going to be specifically for organizations' website development. And then we're going to have a short break at around 5. And in the end, there will be plenty of time to ask questions, feedback, and we will turn off the recording so you don't have to worry to get to the YouTube channel that this will be then after. Second.
All right, so I'm telling shortly about our project's activities. So actually our project is called DigiUp project, which started last June. So it's been a bit over 6 months. So in case you're not familiar with our project, one of the main activity we had was this money digging mapping, where we made a survey and also did interviews with the organization in the multicultural NGO field. And we looked into 4 areas in this field. One of them was state of digitalization, what kind of tools has been already implemented and used in the activities of NGOs. And then the second was the digital skills, where we asked a set of skills, which was about a bit over 20 different areas. And we asked them to evaluate, are their digital skills good, or is it something they would like to develop? And the third one was the communication. We asked different, what kind of communication tools they use, and social media channels, and how it's been used, and what's been the challenges. And the fourth area was the digital support, which is the support the organization is providing to their communities, which can be how to use phones, smartphones, to how to fill out the e-services form, like GETA or DE offices. And based on this mapping, actually we published this mapping both in Finnish and English, so if you're interested in reading more about it, you can do so from our website. And then next one, the next activity is this digital skill training series, as I mentioned in the beginning, which we have it. The first one, this is the first one we are having. Based on the mapping we made, we figure some of the skill set that organization want to develop. So the website, developing the websites and making a new website for organization was one of the skill that came up. So that's why we are organizing this. And actually the next one, it will be about data security and data protection, which we will organize in April. Don't worry about all these upcoming events. We'll be telling at the end of this training, what's coming up and how to register. And then we also are planning to do the materials, but we already have some of them on our website, on how to use Zoom, or what kind of services are available when making website, but we are planning to expand it over the next few years. Yes. And the next is about digital support. This is what I'm providing, kind of individual guidance with organizations, employees, board members, or volunteers. So you can contact me anytime, but I'm available especially on Wednesdays from 1 to 4 o'clock, where you can just pop into Zoom or call me or email me, so I can quickly respond to your messages. For other days, we can just decide on the date and time, and we can in peace go through your needs. And here's some of the examples of what I've been doing or what kind of question I've been getting. There has been a lot of questions about Microsoft, and one of them is like how to use Teams. And there is like a kind of free packages that NGO can get. So people wanted to know where to get this free package, and then how to apply for it, and so on. And some of them wanted to kind of test this live streaming. Like we have Zoom and we sometimes stream it to Facebook. So like how it works, we can have a practice session. And especially after this training, you might have questions about making a website, so you can be in touch with us. And maybe the last quick thing is that sometimes you might not know what kind of support you need. In this case, you can just contact me and tell me about the situation of your organization and what kind of digital tools you might want to try. Then we can go through the situation, and I might be able to suggest a few options. Right, that was about digital support. And then lastly, about volunteer activities, which we are starting from this year. Joo, tässä tulee Sahralta kysymyksiä digituesta. Joo, toki meidän palvelu on sekä suomeksi että englanniksi. Joo. And about the volunteer activities, so we would like to kind of recognize the existing skills in the organizations and also train new volunteers. So we've kind of planned this path for digital supporter as a volunteer. And first of all, we will have a 2-day training where we will go through the basics of what it means to be a digital buddy or digital supporter, what kind of skills, the guidance skills are needed, what kind of thing they need to consider. And second step after the training, people will be applying for this digital open badges. Well, it is quite simple. You will go to a website and then you will answer the questions, and if you answer them correctly, then you will get in these badges that are digitally available. And thirdly, we'll be connecting this digital supporter with the NGOs. If you're already part of the NGO, then you can take these skills and training to your communities. But if you're not part of the NGOs or any organizations yet, then we can connect you to some of the NGOs, depending on perhaps the culture or language skills you have. And actually, we're going to have the first digital buddy training, which is going to be in English, coming up in March. So if you are interested, you can be in touch with me, and we'll be sending all the links related to activities at the end. So that was shortly about DigiUp, and we will be moving on to the actual training part from now.
Yeah, I will be using English and hoping that the text will be, and all the slides are still written in both languages. So hopefully that's going to help. So in this training, the learning objectives and definitions, ideally what we want with Yuri is that after this training, you will have some basic understanding of the work stages of making a website. So we are not going to go very deep because websites are a big topic, and which we will find out today. We would like to provide you some basic instruments that are available at your use and what things you should consider. I personally, just to tell a little bit about myself, I have been in the field quite long, and I think I've designed well over 15 websites, being part of a team that works on websites. So I have some experience from the NGO world and then from corporate and more of sales and stuff. So I have a quite good idea on how these are made, and technically websites are my part of my specialty. So let's get started. So initially, one second. So any website starts naturally with planning. Why I want to put this out for you here is that there's initially 4 basic stages of any website. And these websites, stages, all can go deeper and deeper and deeper in terms of the topic. So for each of these, there is specialists, but for each stage, there's also basics that you need to understand in order to create a good website. So the first stage, it's about planning. It's about finding out what's the target group, what are your needs. Basically, you plan out entire work process for the future. Second stage, it's about design, it's about the visuals, it's about the structure and the communication. How do you want the website to be, like visually as a product? Third, it's the development. Development, it's about if you want to improve something, you already have some idea how you want it to become better. This can consider a lot of things. And the fourth is the launch. So the launch is when your website is online. And as you can see, there's a arrow that kind of shows that the launch and development, they always work together. So once your website is out there, you can gather information and your experience and develop your website again and update it. So if an organization is fully active, has a lot of activities, the website always will have to adapt to the change in society, to the change in the digital world, to the change of your members, if you have an organization. And that is very important to consider. A lot of people who make websites, they think that it's a kind of a conclusive process, that you've done it once and it's done. And I encourage you to think of it as a prolonged activity, which is also part of your communication and part of way to engage with your members and audience. So what we're going to do today, we're going to focus on the three first stages: the planning, design, and development. And we can start from the planning, the most time-consuming, if I would say. So if you start to plan, the first thing you need to do is like, who do you want to do it with? I have seen a lot of people starting web design alone, just on their own. And I do understand that a lot of organizations are very limited on resources, but it's very good to involve stakeholders and the representatives of your employees, volunteers, or the target group. So when you're doing it, just try to come up with a working group that would meet maybe like few times. It doesn't have to be a lot of work for them, but they might give you good ideas. And one of the problems is that sometimes when in NGO world, we have websites that are being developed, there's one person who's done it, but it's good to have communication with that work through the working group who you're actually serving the website for. And that will be one of the most important. Also, if your work involves like political work or advocacy, or you want something like that, it's good to ask for advice from someone who does something very similar. So don't be ashamed to ask for help or someone to be part of your working group with the website. So make it a project that has, kind of a clear timeline. And it's very important to define who's in charge of monitoring these work stages, because often what happens is that websites go off a great start, but then because in the NGO world, we like as organizations, we react to change and frequently that something is happening. A lot of us are not doing it, like some of us are not doing it full time. Some of it is completely volunteer based. Some people have full-time funding. So it really depends on the format that you're doing. So it's very important in early beginning to kind of decide the meetings and some kind of schedule. It doesn't have to be strict, but that is something which is really important to like organize the workflow and take all the time you need for the website. So be realistic with the timeline. Average, if you look at the statistics of average websites, it usually takes, for it to go online, the average is from 2 to 3 months. That's like an average. If we're talking like proper website, which is complicated, then like 3 months is like the average. The best way you can start is learn from the best. Learning from the best means that study similar organization websites, look at their context, make notes, and write down what do you like about them, what you don't like about them. So kind of look at like, is there someone else who's doing something kind of similar, maybe has a similar target group, maybe has a similar funding. Look at what's out there. So in a sense, don't copy, but look at what works in terms of your work. That is very important. So don't, no need to invent the wheel again. Best practices often exist already. And you will save a lot of time if you already make notes on things that you like. So for example, you can just take 1 hour to look at things that you like very much in websites. You can go and pick, oh, I love that part, I want this part, and then look at that and gather that. And then you can bring it to your working group and say, oh, we have these kind of ideas. Also, one really good point that in the planning session, try to think of who are your clients, or who are your target groups. So do you want the municipalities to see it? Do you want to reach a specific language group audience? Do you want it to, is it mostly targeted for people who need information on integration in your language or culture group? So make sure you have a clear idea, because that will define your backlog, the list of needs of your website. So what I'm trying to say is that don't rush into making the website. First, gather all the information you need and investigate properly what is it that is going to be there. So those two kind of go along. So as an outcome, you need that working group as a product has to have basically a list of what must be on the website. And this is very important, that if you're not doing this alone, that people can affect something that's important for them. So your website is also your website also has heard the needs of your target group, of your employees or volunteers, depending who you work with. And that's why I use the word stakeholders. It's an abstract term for that. Another aspect would be have a file separately before you start to do a new website, or if you have, depends where you are at. But first thing, you have to gather the materials. So file every picture, materials, PDF, and everything you want to be on the website, because that's going to be like basically collect into one place before you actually do it. Because what happens often is that if you go into the stage of designing the website, you might notice that you don't really know where to place and what. So in terms of planning, it's very, very important. And 1 second. And as I just mentioned here, so basically usually it's called a backlog, but I just call it like the list of needs, what everything that has to be on the website. So just make one list with your working group. What is all that you need to be there, and filter it out. And also have discussions and meetings, because then some people know better what they need, the ones who are especially your target group. Of course, I don't know specifically what kind of activity you're doing, but basically you have to be very clear on what are your needs on the website. And also what's always important is the question about money. So the more broader functions you have the website, more human resources and more money it's going to need. So pay attention to annual costs and domain services. So when you do a website, you don't just make one purchase and it's done. Every website has a payment plan of the actual platform, and there's also the cost will rise upon what you're using, because plugins cost, the platform costs, and the domain costs. And for people who don't know what domain is the www, then your name of your organization, .fi. So that also will cost you money, depending on which platform you will use. But be very clear about, like, know your budget. And also, if you want to have an understanding of the budgeting, we will look into the certain services a bit later, how much they cost. But you will have a clear idea if you plan it first and then look at what's out there, and then you know what you can actually offer. So this is like the very, very basic things I just mentioned on the behalf of the planning. Very, very broadly, we can go a lot more deeper, and if you have questions, I can open up more of it. But if you want to look at the domain pricings, there's like several services. There's hosting palvelupiste.fi, which is actually verified by the Finnish service Trafi, so it's like trustworthy. Then there's Finnish service like one.com, and then an international service, godaddy.com, and they have various of pricing. One thing is that you have to really pay attention that if you're a small organization and you're limited on resources, try to stay minimalistic. So more you're going to need on the website, more resources it will require. And I'm not talking here about money, I'm talking here about generally the work hours. That making a website and sustaining a website, it's a lot of work. A lot of people who start to do it don't always realize the amount of work that it actually requires and reserve enough time. And one thing is that I've realized that a lot of small NGOs do it alone. There's usually one person who is making it and creating it. And I highly recommend not to do it alone. Have someone to be with you or to reflect upon what you're doing. So there's someone you can also refer to and also monitor the process as a whole. Then also, we're going to go to the design part, and they're very intertwined. So there's no clear distinction between planning and designing. But at this stage, when you're going to have a clear vision on what you need on your website, what's the list, what kind of paging you will have, we'll go into the structure a bit later. Then you can start looking to what kind of colors you're going to be using. Less colors you use, easier is going to build the website. Less colors is always better in terms of design. So it's a lot more readable and it will be more accessible. And also, you need to think of the repetitive elements. What are the patterns, shapes, fonts, principles, rules? What's very important that very early on, you define how do people recognize your brand, therefore your organization. So when you have your website is the core of your communication. So if your website has a certain design that you've stated, the extension will then go on to your social media, to your products, to your services, to all of that. So that is the way people will recognize, and members will recognize that they're part of this organization. I can be very honest that, for example, with Moniheli colors, we have a lot of colors and they're beautiful. But it is a very visual, it is a challenge. Of course, we're coping well with it, but it is a bit more challenging when you have more colors. So it's easier when you have, for example, 3-4 basic colors, and then you use different shades of it, for example. That is something that, and it's also easier to recognize when there's one distinct color that the organization is using, kind of as a brand. Of course, when you're doing colors, and we know that a lot of you are multicultural organizations, also be culturally sensitive to the colors. Think about your target group, that the color is also communicates to them. So familiarity is a good way to also follow. But if you need any materials on visual branding, you can always request. We will always happily send you more. Each of these topics is very, very large, so we're not going to go through the details. Then one very important thing is defining the structure. So as we saw on the previous one, where we have the working group, where you create the list of your needs, then you will, based on that, you will define the structure. So it's very important that you're going to first define the need and then define the structure, because otherwise, if you're going to start making the website and someone is going to demand you, oh, there's this thing is missing, this thing is missing. So it's very important that you kind of make sure you are prepared, that you already have so you don't have to do double amount of the work. That's why it's very important to kind of have more than one person look at the website. And when you have the idea of the structure, of your menu, of what you want to have in the website, then you go to choosing the services, as I mentioned before. So then you can choose the service that the best fits the needs of your organization, the website you want to be building. So here is a very kind of map. So let's say you've created a working group. There's like a working group of one board member, let's say a volunteer, perhaps an employee, someone else who is in your field and knows the organizational work. So what you do, you have a couple meetings, you define what kind of features you want to have. Do you need an online chat? Do you need there to be Twitter or Instagram or Facebook connections? What is exactly that you need in the website? And after you have the list of these things, you can just do it on paper, or you can just do it on there's different services, like you can use the Google Slides, PowerPoint, any software, and project and try to create a mind map. It's very important to have the mind map so you have an idea as well when you're starting to build it. So you're not going to start doing the mind mapping process within the actual platform, because that will take you double amount of work. So there's a good example that you have the main page, then you can rewrite what you want on the main page. Then you have the contact, projects, then you have included 2 sub pages, name of the project. Then, for example, the membership, then there's you can apply for it. So basically try to think of the ideas and maybe look at the layouts of like other organizations that you really like, or just basically invest into this part of the process where you draft it instead of directly into making it, because that will take you a lot more energy and time and resources to do it. And it's a lot more easier to do changes on a mind map than doing the changes on the actual website that's already running and has traffic. So that is what I strongly recommend. So yeah, because often from my observation, when I've done websites and I have, for example, missed this step where I would directly go into making it and changing stuff on the go while I would have a request from my manager or from the board or from the volunteers or from somebody, we just place the website and then they will realize that there's something that they need, but it's not there. But the mistake I did was, for example, in the beginning, that I did not allow people to be heard, to participate in the actual planning process. So if I would have asked them what they expect and think about what they would want there to be, because ultimately NGOs, they serve the people. That's what the job is. So that is something very, very important to consider. And also, as you're doing the mind map, also consider that less clicks is always better. So don't make too many complicated menus. Try to keep it simple so people also will find whatever they need as quick as possible. Attention span of a modern user to research is about 7 seconds per page. So if someone is not truly interested in it, they won't be looking for it endlessly. So good thing to pay attention to, that the contact button or the information is right where you need it to be, and that your main page has all the relevant information that your target group needs. So I would say that I would have to, personally, I can say that I had to put my ego aside of what I think would be good, but I would actually listen to the people, what they feel to be useful. Yeah, I think that will be for this part. And it's nice to see that some more people have been connecting. 1 second. So one of the really good tips, if someone is, doesn't exactly know how to create palette of color or decide what kind of colors they want to use on the website, a very good idea is to use the Canvas color palette generator. So I use this quite often. If I'm creating a website, I would, for example, pick a picture that I like, and it would provide me with the balanced color palette of the photo that I uploaded. It's very easy to use. I can also send it later to our Zoom chat. It's very useful. So as you can see that it chooses very specifically color palettes that work with each other. But you can go and try it out just by Googling, or I'll put the link. But this is something that I've used a lot in terms of any design that I've been doing. And it also gives you the codes here. And these codes are also often used when you're inputting into the platforms, depending if you're using WordPress or using Wix or Yhdistysavain, depending on the platform, but very often they use the codes here. And that's why this app is very good, because it provides you with those. So if we go through the services, I think, Yuri, do you want to introduce these, or shall I do that?
Hold on, sorry. Yeah, I can do the Yhdistysavain part. that I think some of the attendees of this training, I'm not 100% sure, but at least some of you are Moniheli's member associations. And at Moniheli, we are actually been using Uhdistus Avain until recently. And for you to have access to our member pages, that was through Uhdistus Avain. This is quite simple and very easy to use. So if you would like to build a website which is quite simple to use, then this is quite recommended. And on this platform, there is a possibility to have this member registry where you will have like a contact information of the members and also manage the like billing and so other things. Only thing about this platform is that it's available in Finnish only at this point, but it doesn't mean you can't use it. You can maybe use Google Translators. Then you can manage like adding tools and features to your website. Also, it doesn't mean that your website like languages it's gonna be only in Finnish. You can add like text boxes and then add maybe Finnish, English, and something else which serves your communities. But as I said, this is very simple to use, so of course there is a limitation to the design. And price-wise, you can start from the free version. This is possible to start with free, but then this domain, so Verkkosivut, it's gonna be like name of your association .uhdistusavain.fi or something like that. You can't have your own unless you pay for different services. Like I think the next plan was around 20 euro per month. If I had missed something about this, I can continue.
I would say one thing is that Yritys Avain has been used by Moniheli for a long time, but the issue was that at some point the design is not enough. There's certain limits to the design. If you're an organization that's small, like has a very small amount of activities and needs something very simple and clear, this is a very good service. And also the member registry services, you can bill your members, for example, for the membership fees. So this is specifically crafted for NGOs, for associations. And I would say that how I know some organizations that are multilingual, as many of present ones are, they usually use kind of that they put like they use every page in 2 languages. Also, if you pay an extended package for Yritys Avain, you can have also other languages, but they're as sub pages. So it's not the best one, but you can make it work if you try to. So in Moniheli, we would have, for example, the page would be like kind of jäsensivut and membership pages. It would be one button. And then the text would be like varying, like English, Finnish, English, Finnish, or Finnish, English. So that's one way to do it, but not ideal, of course. And it depends if you're using different symbols and different, like if you look at Arabic or Persian languages, that can also kind of, I'm not exactly sure how well it will work. So in these terms, this is not the best platform, but it's pretty good. I have been using this for years and it has served me quite well. So one of the ones that I am quite familiar with as well, the Wix website, it's required basic skills. And I would say that if you want to build a website that's very visual and has a lot of different visual elements to it, Wix is a way to go. If you want to use it full on, it can get quite expensive, but you need to look, there's a lot of variables in pricing. So you need to pay like 8 euros for the advertisements to go away. If you want to buy the domain directly from Wix, I think it's like 40 euros a year, but these pricings are individual to them. Yeah, anyway, sorry for the small spelling mistakes here. But yeah, and it's multilingual. You can have it in different languages and it's quite easy to install and it mirrors the pages as you make them. And it requires some basic skills in terms of digital literacy to have some understanding. But if someone wants to actually do something and you can also, there's chat opportunities, and they have these plugins that are already made in the system. And you can open up a web store, so it's very, very diverse. I would say that this is my personal favorite. I do like using Wix the most out of these because it has a very nice, it's very user-friendly, I would say, if you would like to make something a bit more complicated. Then for the next one, which I have a very mixed relationship with because I've been using this for years, but WordPress, I would say that often you need more advanced skills for using WordPress. You can also, if you don't, the thing is, like, you have to try it to understand if it's for you, because the problem with WordPress, it has so many functions and there's so many opportunities that it's very easy to get kind of lost in it. It is possible to make it multilingual. It has a lot of design opportunities and a lot of service opportunities as well. So it has a lot of outsourced plugins. So WordPress is something that is it's a very advanced tool. I would say that I do enjoy using it, but it does require some research if you're doing it yourself. And often WordPress requires professional assistance. But if something goes really, really wrong, then you might have to then have more spending on money in terms of the website design and sustaining it. So it is this is like a machine that's a lot more complex. There's a lot more buttons in this platform, I would say. But the best way, like, we highly recommend all three of these. They're very, very different, and I think are I don't think either one is like worse, but it depends on you and what you are looking for. If you're looking for something very simple and clear, I recommend Wix or Esitys. If you need some more advanced things, or there is something that those platforms don't provide, WordPress is a tool to choose. And in terms of pricing, there's basic pricing that's like premium is €8 a month, basic is €4 a month, and then domain varies, and it's from €15 a month, depending if you connect your own purchase domain or you buy directly from WordPress. But what's important to know is that some plugins cost money, so that is something you need to look into as well. But as I said before, in the first planning session, define what you need, have the backlog list of needs of what your website has to have, and then look who can give that to you, which platform can actually provide you these tools. Just 1 second. If there's any questions, feel free to ask in the chat, or then you can use your microphone. This is recorded, so if you are going to open up the microphone, it most likely will be in the published video, but feel free to add in your comment section.
Maybe just quickly, like, to people who have joined afterwards, that if you miss the first maybe 15-20 minutes, we'll have the recording available on YouTube channel later on, so you can come back and watch it. And I write in the chat as well that we'll be sending these presentations as well, so don't worry about it.
All right. Yeah, and also one kind of a warning about WordPress is that be careful not to be imprisoned by a web developer. If you purchase someone from the outside, make sure they explain to you how to change things on the website. But what can happen, you can, if you hire a web developer, they can become dependent on you. This has happened before when I've created a website for a client or for an organization, that they would always call me back and ask me more how to fix it. And then often it would turn out that it's a lot of work. So make sure that you know exactly, if you need to, update the contact information, change pictures, create a new sub page, make sure you know how to do it on WordPress before you choose it. That is something that I highly recommend to do. So we're back, and I hope everyone had time to breathe out and have some. I just got myself a fresh cup of coffee, so we can keep on going. And let's go further. So as I mentioned before, usual website planning and design as a procedure requires 4 stages. First is planning, second is the design, third is the development, and then we have the launch. And we just went through 2 of the main ones, and now we're going to go through the development part. So one thing that's very often misused in when you've created the website, you have the structure, you uploaded all of your materials and everything. But one very common thing that I realized, especially with with fresh websites, is that the downloading time is very, very long. And things don't really work out the way they're expected to. Sometimes it's simply the size of the media. So always remember to check the recommended sizing on the platform, because the platforms usually have their own limits and then recommended limits. So always follow the recommendations. That will affect the mobile version as well. So this is something very simple, yet even I forget about it quite often when I upload stuff to Moniheli and I put files in very huge formats, and then I'm wondering why is it not loading well, and sometimes not even opening. So that is something to consider, especially if you're uploading background graphics. That is something that often is, make sure it's in GPG format, JPG format, or PNG. Those 2 are usually preferred, but usually look at the platform, what it recommends to use. By brief Googling, you can also find those recommendations, but they're very individual to every platform. So I'm not going to go through that in more detail. As you can see that every part that we look at has more depth to it. So everything we're going through, there is more to study, there is more to look into. And in future, I hope that if you have questions, that we'll be able to actually craft more in-depth trainings where we actually have more like workshop on certain specific topics. Now we're just covering the general picture. And some of you also already have websites existing. So these things are still applicable to, if you already have a website, you can still look at those stages and see if something that you missed out on. Or you can contact our digital support if you need to have some more specific advice on something. One thing this is something that even big companies and organizations and even municipalities and digital support providers and companies, they don't do. Very few people do proper user testing. Usually, the classic user testing is that you actually select a group of people who are your potential users, and you sit down with them and you ask them, you give them tasks to look for something. For example, can you find, for example, where the contact information is? Can you find when is the next event that you can register on? And you follow and look at how they're operating at the website that you've created, and you make notes and see if there's something you have to fix or something that could be done easier. Usually, the user testing is a whole another work process, but knowing the limits of organizational work and time, just have few people or maybe just a couple people to do the user testing and look at how they're doing it. You can, for example, do through Zoom, or you can have it, on place. And before you publish it online, look at how they're operating on the site. Is the user comfortable using it? Is there something that they get stuck with? And also very important, check the mobile version. Sometimes I have seen websites that just they look amazing on the computer, but on the phone, it's usually can be very chaotic. So make sure, because almost every website that I've designed has usually from 50 to 70% are mobile users. Even if I looked at the registration to this event, most of people have registered through the phone. So that is something very, very important to consider. It's important to just, it's better to build the desktop version and then go through the mobile version. Every platform has a setting when you can just press that preview on phone. It varies. Yhdistysavain has their own setting for that. Wix has their own. WordPress has their own. But the most important thing is that you do this and kind of look at this thing, because this is a very common mistake that people do. And yeah, I think and then if there's a lot of talks right now in Finland and in the Finnish field of digital digitalization, it's about accessibility. Accessibility as a topic is right now regulated by the EU. And there's certain things that have to be considered, but this is only if you're getting a specific type of funding that public funding that requires you to follow accessibility. There's two websites here mentioned. One is in Finnish, and then the one on the right, which is the W3.org, also has pretty good resources to look at. If I'm gonna we do trainings on cultural accessibility for municipalities, and often we talk mostly about the linguistic accessibility, but briefly make sure that you the language you use is understood by your target group. That's what you need to basically know. That's one of the most simplest things I would say. But if you want to read more about it, I could talk about it for hours in terms of accessibility, because it's a very fresh topic. And but right now, if you're a small organization and you're not doing, don't have yet any very big funding, you don't have to worry about accessibility yet. But if you're going to grow, it's something you have to have a separate work process in terms of the website. But if you really want to be proper in a sense, it's good that you're aware of this aspect. Also in the development, like how can you develop a website? How can you, once it's there, what can you do? Remember to gather data about your users. You can see, depending on the platform, I would say you will always have the audience data. Same way we can see it on Facebook. If you have a Facebook page, you can see which websites which parts of your website people are mostly using. You can see what kind of articles or content people are more interested in. And also basically try to use that information. One thing that I want to also to say that I don't recommend doing development of the website throughout. Try to collect things you have to fix and then just do them all at once, because otherwise it's going to be always, because once you change one thing, another thing changes. Once you change another, then another thing changes. So the chain ripple effect can happen, which can then create a lot of work for you. So the simplest thing is that once your website is online, observe and look at it. If you have the working group that we talked about before, gather them together, make it a process, the update of the website, that here's the things that we have observed, here's the feedback that we got, and this is how we want to fix and update the things. And always have these different groups involved in discussion of the website. So I'm going to come again to this. Don't do it alone, because it can be a lot of work and it can get very, very lonely, because if you're just doing it on your own, it's just a lot of things to consider. And I would say that one more thing that is very, very important, that if you are doing a website, think about it in terms of long-term work. Because if you're going to hire, I actually mentioned this before, that if you're going to hire someone to do the website for you, make sure you're able to update it on your own terms. Make sure you know how to change things and structures of the websites, so you're gonna become imprisoned by the design that was created. Because this is very common. I have been in this situation many times. A lot of organizations have been, where they've created a website and they really have no way to get out of it unless they pay the same web designer or web developer or someone else to fix it for them. So this is something, I would say this is one of the #1 things to consider in the beginning, is that choose a platform that you're comfortable with using. I would say that's the main important part of when you're deciding to make the website in general. So is there any questions at this moment?